mind, although I know we'll have an open and honest discussion. Welcome our guests today. Why don't we do just some really brief introductions, and I really do mean name and organization, but also we'll talk about the future, but I'd like a snapshot from each of you about what you see today. And why don't we start to my left with Victor, and we'll pass it round just to really get our audience's brains firing up. So off we go.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. My name is Victor Aguado. I am the representative of Spain in the Council of ICAO. Previously, Director General of Eurocontrol. And the future, I was telling you that the future is bright for aviation. We heard this morning is bright, it's growing, it's recovering, and plenty of opportunities in all the domains.
We're live now.
Good. So the glass is half full. And am I right in thinking, team? Well, I'm not. It's just for me, and everyone else is already mine. That's so helpful, but thank you for sharing. That was helpful. Thank you very much. Chris.
Assalamu alaikum. Chris Allen, Head of Accounts and Partnerships for NATS, based in Dubai at the moment, but moving to Singapore in the summer. Answer the question, I see excitement actually, to be honest. I see a passion and a desire to make sure that we're not building what we lost before. We're actually building something better with a key focus on the environment and sustainability as well.
Right, and give us a quick plug, Chris, on NAT, what it is, what it involves.
So NATS fundamentally is the air traffic service provider in the UK. So they would do en route, oceanic and tower operations, Heathrow and Gatwick predominantly. But we also have a commercial side of NATS that does airspace design and various aspects towards ATM development. Plus NATS owns 100% of Sea Reach Technologies, so a digital tower company as well. So.
Yeah, really powerful. Thank you very much. Stephen Creamer, very nice to see you in person. Tell us what you see.
Hi, my name's, well, you said my name, International Civil Aviation Organization, and I'm the director of the Air Navigation Bureau. We write safety standards and air navigation safety-related standards for the governments around the world to implement as regulators. I see a resumption of the growth that we were experiencing prior to 2019, done in a way that aims towards greater sustainability. So probably double the traffic in 15 years and half the emissions.
Yeah, and just to be clear, the two of you work together. Help us to understand how your role differs, because it's a very specific unit that you're looking after, Steve.
Yes, that's true. I manage one of the bureaus of ICAO, which is responsible for safety and air navigation regulation, implementation of those regulations, and then the auditing of the safety compliance with those regulations by the states around the world.
Yeah, that's right.
I work for him.
Yeah.
No, not really.
This is the other way around. We'll debate that. Okay, Dean, welcome.
Thank you. So I'm Dean McCauley with Strategy in Thales AMS, Airspace Mobility Solutions, based in Melbourne, Australia.
Yeah, now tell me then, this is really a technology company, initially headquartered in France, but you're down under,
yes,
as you say. Just give us a glimpse, because you've got an extraordinary range of organizations you work with. Just brag a little for us.
So Thales bragging. So Thales is quite a large company, multinational, 70,000 plus employees, leader in digital identity, airspace, space, and so on. I've been with them for 23 years, so we've been a leader in air traffic solutions as well globally.
Yeah, fantastic. No, welcome, Dean. Xavier.
Hi, my name is Javier Rubano. I belong to Indra Sistemas. It's also another manufacturer like Thales of ATM systems. And I think to your question, I would like to introduce, probably to extend a little more further, the digital transformation into the industry. Basically speaking about architectures, user experience, artificial intelligence, these kind of things that probably we can go further after.
Yeah, no, fantastic. Thank you. Well, I want to understand how you all work together better over the course of this conversation. But Engineer Abdulaziz Salam Al Zaid, thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Tell us a little bit more about your work.
Okay, so my name is Abdulaziz Al Zaid. I'm the CEO of SANS. SANS is similar to NATS. SANS is the service provision for the ATM. So we are the air traffic management in Saudi. We're a company that has been corporatized back in 2016. I think NATS in 2002, I guess. So looking at the future and how the future would look like, I guess in the past 30 years, the traffic has been growing always, despite many crisis has happened in the past 30 years, and the pandemic would be no different. I guess the comeback for the traffic would be even better, and we can see that. In Saudi, we see in 2022, at least in Q1, traffic-wise, not passenger-wise, traffic-wise, we're almost at 100% recovery in comparison to 2019, which is a very good indication that the year and the pandemic is just behind now.
Yes, interesting. That is a glass half full, if ever I saw one. Thank you very much. Okay, well, I mean, the easy thing in these round tables is to sort of say that I have the speaking stick and I will pass it around, but I'd like us to think together that we're more like around a dinner table where I welcome all of your contributions. So why don't I just really throw it open? Who will get us started on what you see changing the most in this space right now? What do you notice? And there's no bad manners of jumping in, because we can throw it around and we don't all have to have consensus. We respect each other as colleagues, but we certainly see the world differently. Who will get us started? Dean, go.
You want me to? Okay. So I think growing trend we're seeing is a desire for sort of openness in ATM systems, which is quite a challenge.
Just say more about what you mean.
So if you look at ATM systems traditionally, they're quite closed architectures, very locked in, very proprietary in the way they're designed. ANSPs are starting to look for a more open sort of design where they can integrate third-party different solutions and services. But that's a challenge in a safety-secured, cyber-secured and safety environment.
It certainly is. Well, we'll unpack that a bit, but let's have some other observations, please.
Yes, indeed. There is a much stronger exchange of information. There is the need for sharing data and information, and this brings us to the cybersecurity issue in the future.
So on the one hand, already this sense that more data is being shared by more people than ever before. Just explain why that's a good thing for the passenger. Just help us remember.
Well, let me tell you my last 2 trips as a passenger. I arrive on time to a destination, and the airplane had to be in a standby during 20 minutes waiting to land. On the second trip, and very recent, we arrived to the destination and we had to wait in the airplane 20 minutes because there was no bridge to be connected to the... Now, that can be solved if you exchange data from the air traffic service providers, from airports, from the airlines, and this is going to be the future of aviation.
Yes. Absolutely. I mean, even in a very different world of taxi services, I mean, car taxis, I, the customer, can see much more clearly where my driver is than they can. There's an asymmetry now emerging. Steve, give us your take on this or the broader changes that you see.
Well, I think building on what you said, open systems, using commercially available communications exchanges, whatever they may be, generally writing on the internet, that means risk. But there's risk in everything that we do. And when I look at this room, there's no one probably that got in this room without flying on an airplane. 50 years ago, if you'd poll a room like this and ask how many people have been on an airplane, it was less than half.
Yeah.
And that was because the other half didn't want to get on an airplane. They were afraid of the idea.
Yeah.
We've conquered that notion. No one is afraid of flying.
Yeah.
We want to keep it that way.
Yeah.
But the second risk is, who wants to get in the airline business?
Yeah.
And the joke used to be, how do you become a millionaire in airline business? Start with $10 million, right? So we want to...
I want to understand from you two how you harvest the best innovations responsibly. So we'll come to this. But by show of hands in the round, who would take an all-expenses-paid flight into space tomorrow if it was offered to you? Hands up if you would take that flight. Hands up in the round. Hands up who would decline the offer. Who would decline? Guests feel pretty contributing. Okay. I wonder what we'll say in 10 years' time. Okay. Yeah. Chris, what's changing?
So I totally second everything that's been said about data, and it's like data in the strategic sense first. So really, we're coming out of the COVID. It's great the traffic numbers in Saudi are such, but my patch is Asia Pacific, and that's slower to recover. So looking at major airport infrastructure investment, can we use that data to slow down CapEx expenditure, to really sweat the asset first before we go to the next level? Right. And then that elevates into the airspace, and the airspace into things like target time arrival, for example. You're arriving on time, but actually you're straight in the runway, you're not spinning around.
So what's the problem that needs solving then? Is it that the data isn't available, it isn't unlocked, it isn't connected?
I think there probably isn't one silver bullet. There's probably a number of elements behind it.
Give us an example of a data set that would make your life easier.
A data set. So going into kind of the strategic cross-border planning. So, you know, FIR after FIR, if we're all harmonized in the same way, Eurocontrol region has it connected, FAA has it connected across the Middle East, getting there, multinodal ATFM on the horizon to help that flow of traffic. So it is all getting there, but we all need to go in that common approach on a global perspective.
Okay, so feel free to build on this or point to another area of change, Engineer Abdulaziz.
Yeah, I guess one of the area of, I wouldn't say concern, but the things that will be changing in the future is the aerospace user. I think in the past few years, or the past maybe 10 years, 20 years, the users are the same. So it's either military operation or civil operation, wide body, narrow body. But in the future, it would be completely different. You would be seeing UAV in aerospace. You would be seeing BVLOS. You would see different type of operation.
Forgive me, for UAVs, we could say drones.
Drones, exactly, taxiing, whatever. And reflect on the kingdom in a specific. In the kingdom now, we're seeing VFR movement is increasing heavily recently.
And just say VFR, you mean in this context?
It's helicopters and other small aircrafts, I would say. So those users should be sharing the same airspace. And to be sharing the same airspace, you need to transform the way you're handling the airspace. And the transformation would happen on 3 elements usually.
So to what extent, though, in the kingdom, do you feel that you have a blank sheet of paper? Or are you modeling other countries? Because you have a huge opportunity to invent the future.
True. Yeah. So as I said, if we have that white paper, we can do it. Actually, we had that white paper when we put the aviation strategy in place. Right. But there are things that requires transformation. And transformation is the essence of the strategy once you put it in implementation. There are 3 elements: technology, regulation, as well as the operation readiness. Yes. And the key words here that they need to move with the same pace, with the same speed. Yeah. You cannot move with the technology very fast while the regulation is behind, because...
Yeah. And that is what we need to dig into. Javier, briefly.
Well, let me move into an example of slightly different than what he said regarding the 3 aspects of regulation, operations, and technology. Is something that is already happening, but is creating a paradigm shift, which is the virtual towers, remote towers, virtual towers, digital towers, remote towers, augmented towers, whatever we call it, is a paradigm shift that is already operating. It covers regulation, it covers operations, it covers technology, even artificial intelligence to recognize image. Yep. So this is a small area of coverage, but it's already happening, and it is going to grow in the future. It's bringing completely new operations on that.
Yeah. So in the spirit of collaboration, how confident are we that amongst this roundtable and in the bigger round, we have the answers to the problems that need solving, to the opportunity that Saudi Arabia has set out this morning? Or are there challenges that frankly remain unsolved? It's just because we want to push the boundaries on this panel.
Well, technologically, there is no boundaries. We have technology to address the communication, the exchange of data, you name it, even to accommodate new entrants, new vehicles in the airspace. We have an issue that is political, and the political is related to the airspace of each state. And this is something that in certain cases have to be addressed from not a political point of view, but from an operational point of view. And this is what is happening in Europe and in many other regions. Mm-hmm. So, and how to collaborate and share services from one state to another. So it is a political issue.
All right, so knowing that we're on the record, what is the hottest political topic in air traffic management across Europe, for example, right now? What's the thing that we just can't seem to agree on? Just help us zoom into it.
Well, in Europe, we can agree on everything.
Well, I have some UK recent history on that, but it's a serious one.
It depends on what you define as Europe, by the way. Right. But in any case, the difficulty sometimes is related, for example, in the civil military operations. This is a fundamental issue, by the way, because if we want to have an operation in the airspace to have a sustainable aviation, we need to fly an optimal route And for flying optimal routes, you need to have a flexible use of airspace. You need to have access to the entire airspace with a flexibility that is required.
So why don't we start to unpick some of these? And by the way, I'm looking out for questions, for comments. If you want to throw a provocative thought in, what haven't we yet touched on? I'm looking out, so I can see some of you, but let us know by raising your hand. Steve.
So Ali, you've been managing a really fast-paced conversation. We started talking about data, right? So data integration has to happen, cyber protected. So once you have all that data, what do you need? You need the analytics. The artificial intelligence in remote towers is actually an improvement over the capabilities of a human eyeball looking out the window. And that's one of the reasons that's been successful and allowed to move forward is it's an improvement. It wasn't hard to do in the safety world. When you have something that's been stringently certified and approved, it starts to be harder because now you've got to improve upon something that's been very carefully vetted. So when you're looking at an airframe or an operation with a moving vehicle, that's a lot more challenging.
All right, well, let me put you on the spot, Stephen Creamer. What role will humans play in the future of air traffic management?
They'll play an anomaly detection role that's actually crucial because these automated systems aren't perfect and they fall over once in a while.
Okay, but anomaly detection surely better detected by a machine, or are you talking
That's
about
right.
hunch, something a bit softer?
So yeah, there's intuition, okay, and the intuition is things aren't working exactly like they're supposed to, and someone who's well trained and knows how a system is supposed to behave can actually see that.
Okay.
The other thing, there's an example that I want to share from the medical world. An artificial intelligence program could look at a cancer screen and can have a rate of success of about 95%. A human operator looking at that same screen can detect cancer at a rate of about 96%. You put the two together, you get 99.5%.
Okay, so it's man and woman with machine.
Exactly.
All of the difficult questions came from Victor, by the way. He's told me to ask you these. But would anyone else like to come in on the future role of humans? Because we've talked about talent non-stop in Terminal 1. Dean.
Yeah, I guess the challenge is going to be, we were discussing this actually before we came on stage, was the algorithms, right? The algorithms that we use today in ATM are very much predictable. Their outcome, we give them an input and we get the same output. With artificial intelligence and machine learning, if you're using it at its full capability, it can be the response of the algorithm can change. You can have a different answer to a problem depending on the situation. And that's where the regulation side of things becomes very challenging. Is how to manage this in a safety critical environment where we don't know what the machine will come up with.
Okay, so on that, it strikes me, engineer, that we might not need humans at all in the future of air traffic management. I mean, the intuition point. I mean, obviously, Steve will disagree. How do you see it?
First of all, from business point of view, we wish to have an efficient industry, but I don't think it's going to happen. What would happen in the future that you change the set of skills that is required. As an example, today you need an air traffic controller to manage the air traffic in general. Tomorrow you need a system controller, so someone who can manage the system, manage the algorithm, being able to adjust and to recode or reprogram those systems. So you need to have different set of skills, and this is where I would say the operation readiness, the technology would go very advanced in a very speedy way. However, the operation and the ANSP, they need time to convert that and to be able to transfer the workforce from air traffic management into the system management instead of that.
Yeah.
The more the systems and the algorithms improve in computing things, the controller will move from a tactical role into a more planner or a strategic role. It's just a shift in the way the controller will still continue working.
Got it. Okay.
Let me just say something. I would like to challenge Steve, because I think machines can detect intuition also. The problem that we have with artificial intelligence is that we don't know how much the machine is going to learn, and then how you regulate the machine that is learning. That's the difficulty of artificial intelligence. But intuition, what is intuition? We can even think that intuition can be addressed by the machine. but we cannot regulate the continuous learning of the machine. That's the issue.
Right. So, are there any questions, comments at this point? You have to be quick. I used to be an auctioneer, so I'm looking now. Yes. Now we'll get you a mic. Feel free to say who you are, but you don't have to, sir.
First of all, hello. This is a question for Mr. Chris and Mr. Abdelaziz. As an aspiring air traffic controller, what is one piece of advice you would give me and other aspiring air traffic controllers?
Great question. Thank you.
Yeah, no, fantastic question, and thank you. One piece of advice: read a lot. There's lots of rules and lots of regulations, but actually, once you're in the job, it really. They say it's the most stressful job in the world. We just let people say that so they pay us more money, basically. So it's not. It is a stressful job. Keep calm. Have a calm head about you. But actually, the job is very satisfying. It will change over time. I just feeding into what we were saying before. I think what we'll see from the machine learning technology will actually be driven from below, from a drone perspective, UTM perspective. The world of an air traffic controller, there's still plenty of time to be a controller, so stick in. But
Chris, you'd be prepared to have a chat afterwards, wouldn't you?
absolutely, yeah.
Okay.
On the
Well, I see you are very young, so as I said before, you need to think in that you are going to move to the very tactical things today, controllers. Thus, to a more planning, strategic evolution of the airspace. Even cross borders, even planning flow management between countries related to the exchange of data, as we mentioned before. I see this role shifting to these things because the machines will be able to compute faster than us. But thinking a strategic plan is more human.
Okay, great answers. Love that question. Okay, other points or questions at this point? I see a gentleman here, and I'm just looking around. I don't want to miss people behind me. Yeah, let's go here, and then over here briefly, and we'll keep marching on. Sir.
Hello, thank you very much. I come from the industry. I was an air traffic controller myself, and I've been working for NSPs for a big part of my life. I would like to ask both the industry as well as the representatives from the NSPs how they are going to work in the future, because very often what we find is that any new functionality, any new operational requirement takes a long time to develop, and it's very expensive. There is no interoperability among the different systems that operate in a control tower or in a control center. How this is going to evolve in the future? Because I see sometimes that the ANSPs become technological hostages of the suppliers. Is there a solution for that?
Right, brilliant question. Hold that thought, team. Can we race over to the far side? Just to the gentleman at the back, because we'll answer it in due course. I just want to harvest it briefly.
Thank you very much. Khaldun Muhtasib from DTV. I'm asking, what could prevent the air navigation service provider from adopting a framework to exchange data similar to what an airports have, that like the ACDM, for example, the airport collaboration decision-making platform that many airports now has already adopted to exchange data. This is for you, gentlemen.
Yeah, it's a great question. So thank you both. Let me ask, and Steve, help lead us in on that with Victor, because what I'm trying to get from you two in particular is how do you identify and transition the next big thing safely, responsibly? Because I understand you've got some innovative frameworks in place. Get us started, Steve.
Well, Victor knows more about the past than I do because he was involved in the Air Navigation Commission when the FANS Committee built the current architecture for satellite-based navigation and communications.
We've been hijacked. Look.
Yeah, look at that.
It's not satellite.
Yeah.
This hasn't happened before. This doesn't happen at Buckingham Palace.
But at the same time we were working on satellite-based communications and nav, the world was trying to introduce something called microwave landing system. Microwave landing system went through a big, long technical development that took so long that by the time it was matured, we were introducing satellite navigation.
Yeah, I was there.
Right? So it became a challenge for people to say, well, it's not cost effective for us to move forward with this technology. It's expensive and nobody's equipped with it. We'll stay with ILS until we go to GPS or GNSS. And that's what we did, right?
So basically, the world is smaller, and the future is satellite coverage of surveillance, communication, and everything. And the future is the exchange of information and collaboration among all the players. including the airports, the air navigation service providers, and among the service providers in different states. And this is what is happening now in Europe.
Okay, interesting. So we could get much more on this, but Steve, come.
So one aspect of that history is that there was a development of, there were two protocols developed for satellite-based communications. One protocol was developed in one sphere of the world, and one was developed in another sphere of the world. The second sphere of the world had manufacturers begin to build equipment and deploy services using that protocol, and that became what became known as FANS 1, FANS 1A, and that became the Oceanic Datacom Communications System. The other protocol never quite gained traction. Now, both of them were invested in quite heavily, a lot of research, a lot of time spent. So what we're trying to do now is shift from the methodology where we spend years and years and years doing specifications because we're cutting edge, and now we take off the shelf because frankly, for communication services, we don't need to be cutting edge. Working off the shelf, we need strong advocates working with a regulatory partner who can approve the introduction of the technology and the operating procedures in a cost-effective way.
And is this part of what's known as your direct submission process, Steve?
It's part of the protocol that we're trialing now. And so in that methodology, at the local level, you have a solution provider who has a problem to solve. They work with the people who will work with that technology, which usually includes pilots, air traffic controllers, engineers, all of whom have to agree that I could work with this in the concept that's being proposed. And then you have a regulator who comes on top of that and says, if you do it the way you're proposing, I could probably approve it because you're going to mitigate it with the risk management that you're going to put in place. If I can see that done in a state that knows how to do safety management effectively with a state safety program, then they can implement it right there.
Okay, so in theory, and Chris, I haven't forgotten the second question, but in theory, Dean, this should be music to your ears.
Would be, yes. but you're right. It's and digital towers is maybe kind of an example.
Good example of that.
Right, where you saw in Norway and so on, with the use cases to deploy digital remote towers, and it was done ahead of the safety case approvals. And then once the systems were in place, they then went about chasing down that regulation.
That's right.
So what's your challenge to your friends on the panel? What do you need them to do even more of?
I think as an industry provider, I mean, it's a tough industry, ATM, and we continue to invest in those technologies. But it is I think, and we're starting to do that. We're doing it with the IATA now in Europe, is to work closer together. I think the relationship between industry and regulation, so that we can advance those technologies.
Because in theory, engineer, you could harvest solutions from the world's best innovators, and yet clearly there's an incentive to grow things at home. How are you going to tread that line here in the kingdom?
From our point of view, is for example, we don't treat, for example, any technology provider as technology provider. We treat them as a partner. And the way we're seeing that, the way how it should move in the future, that we collaborate even in the technology part and the requirement for the future needs when it comes to technology. An example with both, for example, Indra and Thales today. Both companies were working heavily with them when it comes, for example, for the virtual tower. We're working with them on the requirements and how this requirements of the technology would fit into the Saudi market and how this would be served and how can it fit the human factor, which is something maybe it's not similar to European countries or the American countries. Thales as well, we have that. So the key word is if we want to move with the same speed, if we want to get the benefit out of that, we should be able to collaborate at the early stage, coming back to your point. Otherwise, the system will be force fit into our need.
Yeah, it's a brilliant flip on it. Now, Chris, just help us translate this second question, because what you're being presented with is what sounds like a very clear opportunity.
Absolutely, totally agree with it. And it sounds simple on paper, and it should be simple. But I think a lot of it's been answered already. It's kind of technology is the enabler for it. You know, we send flight plan messages, we send all sorts of data between ANSPs, cross borders, and what have you. But is it enough? Is it quick enough? It's not yet. It needs to get there, it needs to improve, and it will advance as time goes by.
Okay, so let's just look around, and I know that the team will tell us how we're doing for time, but what's not been said? What were you hoping would be touched on and we've totally forgotten to touch on? Just give us a hand. I won't force you to say who you are, but Steve, I bet you've got an item for me as I scan our room. Go, please.
So I'm looking at the opportunity that the Saudi program provides. And let's say we want to integrate large commercial air transport with drone operations and cargo delivery, remote piloted. And let's pretend for a second that they come together with a vendor or two and they say, wow, we've got the technology, it's perfect. It uses spectrum in a different way because it's going to be more efficient. The challenge we've got is scaling that quickly and doing it in a way that protects the investment risk that Saudi Arabia might have as they try and go forward, pushing into something that's, greenfield in the technology. That's what's always stopped us in the past from doing really cutting-edge transitions. That drone flying around this room, if you took it anywhere else in the world and turn it on, it will reconfigure to the software and radio requirements in the location you took it to, because that's the way the Chinese built it. So we have the opportunity to essentially build radios for aviation that essentially can conform to wherever they are if we made global standards that could do that. But we do that based upon a local solution that gets replicated up to the global level quickly.
So it is worth all just coming back onto that page, isn't it? What's at stake? Why is the future of ATM important? Why does it matter? Just help remind us what's at stake.
Well, what we see with some of our customers is they seem a bit under threat in a way from an NSP perspective. With the incoming drones and so on, and there's a kind of fear of if we don't get on with it and figure out how to adopt this technology and manage the kind of UTM, ATM world, we might become irrelevant and it might be taken over by someone else or someone with a different capability. And if you look at the UTM problem, today it's starting and we start to see drones literally flying around, but there's still visual line of sight. So once we get past this beyond visual line of sight limitation, that's an inflection point where drones are just going to take off.
Does anyone have a slightly more... please, come in.
Yes, regarding the UTM, and I would like to quote Mr. Simon, the Kanzu Director General, because one of at the Drone Week, he was saying that the only way in how to overcome the threat of the drone, because today we need to segregate between ATM and UTM, and this segregation creates the threat. Actually, we should treat it as a traffic management. It is a one system, it is a one airspace. They should collaborate, and over there should be enabled by a system and technology that will be able to do the proper segregation and to have a safe operation between all of the airspace user. And this is the true way in how to should envision the future. There is no UTM and ATM. It's just a traffic management. It's a one airspace.
Help us on this. No, Chris, I'll bring you in. But Victor, I know you want to.
The challenge is to transpose that to the world. You can have a solution in one particular country, in one particular location, but at the end we have to transpose this to the world, the UTM and ATM together. And I don't have any doubt that this is going to be compatible and it's going to be feasible. There is no question at all, because before we incorporate new vehicles into the airspace, and the challenge of the air navigation service providers is to provide services to anyone that is using the airspace. And anyone, not only the drones, but also the ones that are going to be suborbital flights.
Absolutely right.
So it's all of them.
Thank you, Chris.
Just from a high level perspective, just to answer your question, why is it important? I think we said on one of the speaking roles this morning, the future of aviation in Saudi Arabia has been around a passenger. So actually, there's passenger comfort. Well, who's an ANSP's customer? It's the airline. The airline's customer is a passenger. Well, actually, so what can we do in reality that helps enable continuous climb, continuous descent, free route airspace, flexible use of airspace, dynamic airspace? How do we make this the most cost-effective and the best performance of the airspace? And then all the little tools below and systems below is what enables that.
Really important way to see that big vision. How are we doing for time, team? Would you keep us posted when we've got 10 and 5? Let me look around for other contributions. What would you have said if you were in the round? I see you there, sir. We'll come down to you, and I'm looking for other voices and faces, please. Why don't we start here, and then we'll go across to the gentleman. Please, feel free to say where you're from, who you are. You don't have to.
Hi, my name is Fatin. I work at the Airport Operations Control Center in Bahrain. as a resource planner and flight data management, we also work closely with the air traffic controllers. I just want your insight on having a system that, a unified system, or your insight on having a standard system that's being used by the resource planners as well as the air traffic controllers, who basically pass the message to the pilots in terms of what stand they're going to, because we always have this challenge. Sometimes the system that the air traffic controllers use get different informations or different aircraft registrations, and they end up directing the pilot to different stands. And we often have to correct them just hearing them through the VHF or things. So what is your insight of having a standard system that's being used by both departments, let's say?
Yeah, why don't we get Xavi on that? Yeah.
Thank you for that, because this is part of the evolution we were mentioning. Now the technology is also moving to the data service provision in terms of single source, reliable source, everybody, every user sharing the same data. This is not the case today, and that will help a lot in coordinating different users at all levels, from tactical to strategic flow management. This is something we need, and it's something that is coming in the new revolution. Yeah. As we mentioned before, because it's part of the things incorporating data analytics, incorporating reliability to the data, and single source.
Very no, Dean, we're not averse to a big public announcement from Thales today. You can tell us what's coming down the pipeline.
So what, I mean, basically what you're seeing today is each of those systems has their own databases, right? They're storing their own information. And today they're relying on exchanging messages with one another that are not, proprietary and so on. So, and it's exactly what talking with Javier is the same thing as moving to an open architecture environment where there's more interacting with each other's data, and rather than having different replications of the information and risking that being different, that's where we can start to commonalize the data and make things more efficient.
Yeah, I mean, it's a brilliant question. Chris, it makes great sense. When I interview people in banking and healthcare, and we have similarly open conversations, the flip side of that coin is security, safety. What sort of questions should we be asking on that side?
It's a really good question. I'm not sure I'm the right person to answer that one, but cybersecurity is obviously a hot topic. In many ways, we go to a system-wide information management, SWIM environment, then that information wants to be shared. We've all got a desire to share that information, but actually it's got to be done in the right way, in the right secure way. You mentioned before kind of some of the problems of not having the same information. Put that on a cross-border perspective outside the airport, put that into a strategic sense of stand planning and management of the people actually on the stand and everything else around it. It suddenly becomes a bit of a mess. So we really need to answer the question, how do we make that secure?
Well, don't worry, because Steve's going to tell us the answers.
Exactly.
So you said that humans could be replaced by the computers. At what cost? Now, the reason I asked that question is because it's expensive to build a computer that's as good as a human at doing all the things that we do. That question that just got asked is the kind of question that people who are working in the system are asking all the time. And they're actually looking for ways that they can get their question into the queue for solutions to be developed. We need a way of essentially allowing everyone in the industry who is doing this work to be able to pose those questions and to have some sort of a network for solutions that can be lifted by all the solution providers, the ANSPs, and the regulators to make those solutions come to a fruition and get global in a hurry. The last thing I'll say is, 40 years ago in the United States, there were 12,000 controllers. Today, with 3 times as much traffic, there are 12,000 controllers. There will always be 12,000 controllers. So no matter how much you automate the system, if we're doubling traffic every 15 to 20 years, the number of people isn't necessarily going to reduce. So a lot of the industry, there's a fear that my job gets taken away by automation. And I would argue that it's the exact opposite. The job evolves, and actually more jobs get created to go with the deployment of the automation.
Really powerful take. Right, so let's gather the other question here. I think it was in the front row. We'll raise the microphone down. Feel free to say who you are, where you're from. You don't have to.
I'm Marzouk Al-Ghamdi from the Saudi Academy of Civil Aviation, ex-air traffic controller. And I have a question to His Excellency Mr. Zaid. Does SANS have any initiatives to collaborate with other NSP providers in the Middle East to integrate the air traffic management system to cope up with the increased, very clear demand on the air traffic?
So in terms of collaboration with the adjacent country, definitely, and it went even beyond. I think we, for example, with Emirates, with Bahrain, I guess, and with Oman, since all of us, we were putting tender, so we put the tender in place, and at that time, it went all of the systems with Indra. So we have a great collaboration and a potential for integration between our systems. And it is happening, and the agreement between us, it is in place. So that is there. Maybe it's not fully activated, but it's part of our agreement and it's part of our journey with our adjacent country. So it is there, definitely. If that is answering your question.
It is needed, and it is needed.
It is needed, right.
Yeah, because the Gulf has one of the most dense traffics in the world, so, yeah, and it will become even more dense.
So the GCC in specific, for example, the European countries, they were enabled by, for example, the great collaboration that is happening between them. The Eurocontrol and the network management is really building on efficiency across all of the countries, which is maybe this is a learning opportunity for us today. Air traffic flow management between the, for example, the east part of the GCC, Emirates, Qatar, Bahrain, Oman, Saudi, and then how to feed into that traffic and feed it back to the European countries.
And it is not, exactly, it is not only the region, it is all over the world. I mean, we have to have this coordination between Asia, Pacific, Middle East, Europe, the US. This is the future. This is the future.
And the organization is a challenge because of the sovereign interests of the member states.
Yes.
So I know about where every airplane in the world is right now. It's all right here in my pocket. But what can I do with that information?
Yes. And it does make you think why forums like this are so important. Having people around the same table, in the same room.
Yep.
Not talking about each other from thousands of miles away. If we're just entering into our last sort of few minutes, but if we just pause with our round table, and by the way, would you please agree with me that these have been fantastic guests? Let's give them a round of applause for being so brilliantly valuable to us. Thank you. A final thought, and really it's just a 30-second thought. It could be the one that attracts the guests to come and talk to you afterwards for coffee. That tends to work well. But it could be a reflection on the conversation we've had. It could be a rallying call to your fellow forum guests. Chris.
Final thought. Well, kind of following what we said, the future looks bright. I think we've got a long way to go. There are going to be stumbling blocks in the way, but actually there's a motivation and desire that seems different. You know, we've had volcanic eruptions and the network's been disrupted for a period of time. This is different.
Okay.
And I think it's been driven by the UTM world as well as the ATM world. The net zero, NATS has a 3DI tool that monitors continuous climb descent. How do we actually really look at that airspace differently? It's not all about capacity, it's about operational performance of the users.
Yeah, big challenge, love it. Xavier.
Well, I would say that we are here from different areas, regulation, manufacturing industry, NSPs, and as you can see, we all speak the same language and the same ideas. So the only thing we need to do in the future is to put in practice this cooperation and evolve faster.
Yeah. I mean, that is a very bright way to see it. Absolutely. Dean.
I think where I started from is enabling that sort of future open way of working, keeping both safety and security in check, and if anything, enabling sort of smaller firms like SMEs, startups to bring that rapid technology to the industry.
Yeah,
something
brilliant to hear about some of the new frameworks that might accelerate that today. Thank you, Dean. Victor.
ATM is a field of collaboration, not competition. This is a fundamental key. We can cooperate. We don't need to compete. And that's the magic of it.
Yeah, and that's my biggest lesson, I must say, listening to you in conversation. Engineer Abdulaziz, please.
I joined the aviation industry, I think, 5 years back. Prior to that, I was coming from the manufacturing industry. And I can see clearly collaboration is the essence of this industry. And this is a great example. We are all here, and we are agreeing on the future. And I believe goals can be achieved if the intentions are aligned. So we are aligned on the intentions.
Yeah, and thank you for being an inspiration on that front. We've really enjoyed hearing your vision today. Thank you to all of our guests, and crucially, thank you to everyone who made their way to this gate. Your next gate choice awaits, and please choose wisely, but I will see you back in the main Terminal 1 for the end of the afternoon. But a final thank you to our brilliant guests, to Victor, to Chris, of course, to Stephen, to Dean, to Javier, and of course to Engineer Abdulaziz. I'm very grateful to you, each and every one. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
to a customer-centric, with an integrated, seamless kind of experience, where the customer is really at the end of what we are doing, with no hassles, with full predictability, with efficiency, and with a hyper level of customization and personalization. All of us, we receive multiple offers, but they are not truly kind of personalized. And this is something that needs to change. We expect the industry and the kind of the full passenger experience to be more and more integrated, not only about the experience of flying in the airport, but the full kind of experience of traveling, since the booking kind of process, to have a one-stop shop type of application where I can basically book my flights, my car, the concerts, the restaurants, the hotel at the destination in a very integrated and seamless way, where the different players connect on the backbone, but there is just a very kind of a single kind of touch point to the passengers. We are seeing already across the world multiple, let's say, case studies and pilot initiatives on how really to pioneering many of these kind of ideas across the full airport kind of journey. And obviously airlines are doing as well their kind of initiatives, but they are still far to be kind of fully integrated. And we really expect the future to move from long waiting times to short waiting times, to move to a more predictability type of solutions and to be way more customized and integrated. And therefore, there are multiple kind of implications in terms of the need to really coordinate with multiple kind of stakeholders, to invest on new technology, really leveraging the power of data and analytics, and really finding better and differentiated kind of value propositions and customer experience with the right and sustainable kind of economics. So with that, I would like to open the stage, and I'm inviting our guest speakers today to the stage. So I would like to invite first Sami Shoaib, the aviation blogger, #1 aviation blogger in the world, with more than 6 million followers and close to 30 million views on a monthly basis in the aviation industry. So Sam, please welcome to Riyadh, welcome to the stage. I would like to invite engineer Abdulaziz Al-Damash, the Vice President of GACA, in charge of quality and customer experience and overseeing the different kind of Saudi airports. I would like to invite Jalban Al-Jalban, the CEO of Altan Fiti, the luxury high-end executive lounges in the kingdom, this for the royal family, high government officials and high net worth individuals. I would like to invite David Lavrel, the CEO of CETA, leading supplier and solutions provider on the IT space across the full aviation ecosystem. And finally, Professor Keith Mason from the Cranfield University, expert in airline and air transportation kind of economics. Thank you very much, all of you, for your presence here in Riyadh today. So I'd like to start with you, Sam. So you are the most well-known aviation blogger in the world, right? With lots of followers, and you perfectly know the different kind of passenger experience, what good looks like, what bad good looks like. Can you please tell us a little bit more what are the issues and the main reasons of poor satisfaction with the passengers today?
First of all, I think the stage doesn't rotate. I was thinking we're going to turn around and doing 180 here, and we might be here a very long time because I do have a long list of pain points to tell you all of that, and I'm sure all of you have encountered one of these pain points at some point, right? And there's nothing perfect out of passenger experience. You could have experienced flight delays, flight cancellations, long queues at airport check-in, long security queues, delay on the tarmac while you're sitting on the airplane ready to fly, crammed seats, not so good leg room, reduced in-flight offering, maybe they cut costs from a meal down to a box meal or down to a biscuit. And also when you arrive, right, also delay on the tarmac to get to the gates, and also delay in getting your baggage delivery. I think we are transitioning through the pandemic, so obviously there are shortage of staff, right? And 2 years ago, when we hit this unprecedented crisis, a lot of staff were left from the airline. Now suddenly the demands are back sharper than ever. And then we have a shock at the airline that for 2 years they haven't received this volume. So that's why we saw a lot of news. There's a lot of hiccups and delays. So I think that hopefully this is why we are here to discuss to how to smoothen out and then reduce some of these pain points back to a more acceptable level and more a better smooth transport experience here. But I also want to say it is also equally hard these days to get a response from the airline when you want to get something, like whether you are trying to check your refund status for your tickets or whether there's something, right? You're not really talking to a human anymore. You're talking to a automated robot on Twitter, or you're just emailing, there's no replies and all that. So that experience is also equally poor from that standpoint, that you're not getting the response you want, and that's frustrating. And then perhaps one other fact is, in aviation, we have so much advancements, but the main focus in the cabin comfort is in first and business class. In economy class, the seating arrangement hasn't changed since maybe 1950s. You still have, on a single body, 3 and 3. That's since Boeing 707 or Comets has ever flown. It's still the same configuration. There hasn't been enough focus on economy class comfort. And then I met a guy yesterday on my flight. He argued with me. He said, they actually have bigger bins, bigger overhead bins, so you can put more space for your baggage. He said on the A220, the middle seats is actually wider. So I don't know who wants to sit in the middle seat, because that's actually 1 inch wider in there, right? But you're still battling with your neighbor on the armrest here. There's always a fight. You sit next to me with another guy, right? And so I found that economy class is not as innovative as we would like to be, and every passenger would like to be. And at the end, I think I also have another pain point, which is maybe a very hard one to fix, is how do you combat jet lag? This is also a part of passenger experience, strictly speaking, because I flew in from the US 15 hours, and right now my body clock is upside down. And and no matter how you travel, in luxury first class or in economy class, at the end of the day, you flew 15 hours in a metal tube at 40,000 feet. Your cabin altitude may be 8,000 feet, 10,000 feet, or 6,000 feet. You're still traveling by air. I don't know what ways we can do to reduce or eliminate that jet lag. That will be amazing, because you will feel not tired, just like, sitting at home for 10 hours and going on a plane. And I think that's the ultimate form. That may be a fantasy from me. So all in all, these are the pain points from me.
Thank you. Abdulaziz, you are in charge of quality across all the different Saudi airports. Now that all the airport operations were corporatized and GAC is mainly focused on the regulator role, can you tell us a little bit more of your role to ensure the right kind of passenger experience? And what are the main challenges that we are facing today as a regulator to ensure the right level of customer satisfaction?
Great. First of all, thank you, Andre, for having me and my fellow panelists. It's my pleasure to be here. Actually, I think the team is taking note now what Sam has said, because he kind of gave us a 360 about the pain points across the passenger experience. GACA, if you look at the whole forum, the key words in the forum is said about the passenger experience. His Excellency, the President, earlier in this morning, he closed his statement by saying that customer first. So we are taking the customer-centric approach in building all our regulations. And this year, actually, 2022, is a very transformational year for the whole aviation industry. This is the first year where GACA spin off all the operation to the private sector. Today, GACA is the regulator, enabler, motivator to the aviation industry. We are not running airports anymore. What we are focusing on is making sure that the airports and the private sector running the airports the right way that should be run, and meeting the passenger expectations and standards. So we started building a program called Airport Total Quality Evaluation Program. This program taken into consideration 2 parts, being proactive, which has 2 components. Performance or operational KPIs being measured on a monthly, daily basis, and monitored on a monthly basis. The second part is that the infrastructure readiness, So in those two programs, we cover more than 14 touch points for the passenger experience throughout the airport, more than 1,500 checklist item or items being checked annually for each terminal. The second part, which is a reactive, which focuses on the voice of customer. So we launch customer surveys. We do 24/7 customer complaints and omni-channel to get the suggestion and customer experience. Those kind of data and inputs will feed us with more than 600,000 samples a year to be analyzed, to be taken into consideration, to improve the passenger experience. So GACA building those regulations, setting the standards for the airports to make sure that where are we heading is aligned with what the customer expecting and what are the experience that we are facing. Talking about the main pain points, I think Sam covered most of them. It goes mainly with the flight delayed and cancellations, and also the facilities. And that's why by building the checklist and building the KPIs and performance or operational performance KPIs, will cover those two parts from a regulator perspective.
Thank you. David, you are the CEO of CETA, one of the global IT solutions kind of provider in the aviation kind of ecosystem, and definitely with lots of cutting edge kind of solutions and technologies connecting the full backbone. But still you face some kind of challenges. What is preventing you to achieve the optimal level of service and passenger experience that you could provide to your clients across the world?
Yeah, so first of all, in as much as I'm going to talk about the challenges, I think I also want to shed quite a positive light because I'm fundamentally believing that technology has a lot to do to help. And we're coming out of the pandemics with an aspiration and a demonstration that technology can help in every domain like we were never before. And I think everybody in the room has now learned through the COVID times to do a number of things through technology, in particular mobile technology. And so the acceptance of the passengers to leverage the technology to help us as an industry to better manage is very high. Now from a challenge, the challenge we face is basically the speed of adoption of technology and the fact that our industry remains complex. If I take the health example, so we've all seen those flurry of health apps during the pandemics, and everybody thought that it could be a good solution. But invariably, at a point in time, when you were boarding 777, you would need to face 10 different apps and schemes. And we as an industry had not thought about how to bring that together, giving the choice to passengers to choose whatever health app they wanted, but us being able to accommodate that choice. So we need to operate, the job of the airport is to operate and facilitate different carriers. And so you already have multiple customers from that perspective, and we've got a variety of passengers in front of us, and we as the industry need to bridge that multiple channels together. And I think today, this is probably the biggest break to the adoption of technology, is how do we do that in a coordinated manner and bring regulators with us so that they try to minimize the number of pain points. We will never really totally eliminate that.
Joban, you are the CEO of a very unique kind of operation in the world, managing all of the very VIP lounges across different airports in Saudi Arabia for the royals, for the high government individuals and ultra high net worth individuals. Can you tell us a little bit more, given the nature of your clients, what are the challenges that you are facing today to really deliver the optimal kind of passenger experience?
Excellent. First of all, thank you for having me today. I don't know if you experience the Tanfidi, you will not face the difficult time with the delay and other challenging in the airport. We will facilitate it for you and you will feel home and free at our terminals. Let me take this advantage or this opportunity to explain a little bit what the Tanfidi is doing. Tanfidi is end-to-end, door-to-door, luxurious services from home to aircraft, from aircraft to home, taking all the journey or the touch point through their travel. Our main segments, our main guest is the high ultra net worth and also the royal family. We are at Tanfidi registered almost more than 25,000 members as a base guest in our database, where we are facing three main challenges. Number one is the infrastructure. We have to capture 1% at least from the civil aviation strategy, which is around 3 million by 2030, whereas the current infrastructure and facility cannot give us the opportunity to facilitate the wants and needs and also the customized products for this specific segments. The second challenge, which is the age group. We have different age group. They expect and request different product and demands and also different experience. And also the pandemic impact also needs more customized in our product and services, where we should develop and customize and personalize each services for each group. So this is the second challenge. The last challenge, which is the main members, is not actually the process measurement in our terminals, where they are using their dependents or also assistants to process their journey through the airports or through their travels. So we are facing time of personalize and get the data from them to see what exactly the challenge they are facing or also the feedback. So we are trying today to capture more data from their assistant or from their dependents to capture more data and feedback from the main member and also from their dependents to personalize and improve our services. Our measurement today in our terminals is not only passenger experience. We are developing an experience management framework. We are measuring the voice of employees, the voice of guests, and also the voice of process to make sure we are capturing the end-to-end and integrated customer management framework. This is basically the main challenge that we are facing today at Tanfidi, since we are in the mood of a startup. We just established last year based on the privatization program that happening in the GACA or the civil aviation industry.
Perfect. Professor Keith, despite the pandemic implications on the aviation industry, the industry is still one of the major contributors, directly and indirectly, to the GDP, and is expected to roughly double in the next 10 to 15 years. In the case of Saudi, we are targeting to triple kind of the growth and in a shorter period of time. Can you tell us what are the expected implications in this post-pandemic world across the different type of traveler kind of segments, and how the different kind of industry, business models and economics need to adjust to accommodate the required kind of changes in the industry?
Okay, thank you very much. Evidence over pretty much the last 60 years is that the airline industry doubles in size every 15 years, and the fundamentals are still there. Although the growth has slowed in North America and is slowing in Europe, we are seeing significant growth in India, across the Middle East and Asia, and that is going to be the driving force of growth in the next 15 years, and we are expecting the market to double. What we should remember, though, is that those markets are people who are flying, they're new people into the market. Many people are already traveling, but they're drawing in new people who are traveling and often who are looking for value. We also, on the other side, have concern about the sustainability, and I'll come back to that. But more than half of the people traveling today are millennials or Gen Z. And you have to remember that these are digital natives. They do not accept things that don't work. They don't like things that don't work. In terms of traveling, they want added value, but they are increasingly concerned about the environment. So they are looking to airlines and airports to be have environmental credentials tied into the very business of what they do. And we've heard today about whether business class is dead or whether everybody should be flying with Wizz Air in economy, in very dense configurations. And the reality is, somewhere in between, that if you're not the lowest cost operator in a market, you've got to be different. You've got to lead to differentiation. And so the question is, can you as an airline differentiate on customer experience? And research shows that people feel about an airline, not just about the hard things, the technical things, the functional things, many of which that Sam was talking about, but also the emotional things. And the biggest single emotional thing is cabin crew. This is not IT, this is people. And you've got to get both of those things right. And so the airline that can make sure that they can deliver that, they are going to be able to succeed. And that's the challenge. In terms of business travel, the evidence seems to suggest that that market is changing. Why would you travel halfway around the world to meet somebody who you work with in the same company? That intercompany business is beginning to disappear. But yes, more leisure travelers are upgrading. But I think the implications in terms of the business model for airlines is that there's going to be a smaller requirement for business class seats up the front, which gives you more economy seats up back, which gives you opportunity to improve the economy product. So to summarize in terms of what airports and airlines can do for customer experience, for airports, it's freeing the process. It's being free to explore, and it's being free to do what you want at the airport. I don't want, because I don't want to go and buy duty-free, to have to walk through a duty-free shop to get to my gate. That's my personal choice. If I could pay $3 to bypass that, I would. So which airports can provide that to me, to make a personal choice for me? And in airlines, it's being recognized in real terms, being able to offer the movies that I actually want, the food that I prefer, and to do it seamlessly. I don't want to have to give my data over and over again. Get that stuff right, and the airline that can do that is going to win the future customers of the airline industry.
Sam, today we already experienced lots of hassles when we travel. If we expect the traffic to double without really proper rethinking the passenger kind of experience, upgrading the infrastructure and the value proposition, could lead to really negative outcomes. What do you expect to be different in the future of the aviation industry to avoid that?
So I think in the 80s and 90s, we were seeing 747, and later we're seeing A380 kind of ringing the sky because they go from hub to hub, from busy airport to busy airport. Then you get on a smaller airplane to go to your final destination if you're going to a smaller kind of a secondary cities, right? So I think the sweet spot right now in aviation, finally people have recognized is the medium 200-seater size. That's the medium airplane like a A321, something size like that. Because the other day I was told from an airline executive, it costs an airline 3 cents per kilometer per seat on the same routes. But if you put a 777, that might be a wide body, it costs you 3 times more than the 3 cents on a narrow body. So this is why the economics drives the orders of airline, drives the manufacturer to consider to come out with a very efficient, direct airplane can go from A to B for 8 hours or longer on a single aisle, 200 seats airplane. And you will see that coming up and you will see a lot more direct flight from secondary city to secondary city, which is a good thing, and maybe even more frequencies. But there's always a bit of downside on that as well, right? It's a single aisle airplane, so you may not feel as comfortable as a double aisle airplane. It might take longer time to board. So when you see a question, when you see a challenge there, we have to look into whether it's technology or a human solution to overcome that as well. So that's the evolving process. But of course, I like a lot of technology CETA has done, which I actually personally try out the biometric. So my face became my passport, or my face became my boarding pass. So when I walk through the gates, I can just take a picture of my face, and then the gates will open and let you board. I do not have to carry any piece of paper. And I think that's the ideal form in the future. You can literally, without carrying any paperwork, if it all synchronized and go to the airport and check in, and everything is, is in the digitization. I also wish that security checks, imagine without taking your shoes off, without going through this belt and putting your laptops out and all that, just carry all the stuff, going through a scanner, just walk past it, and then they can screen you, just walk past it as it is. And then, I think the security process is always a long one, and long queues, and also sometimes invasive, right? And if we can, this one will maybe relieve a lot of pain point, we can get that right. And then lastly, the other 2 points I want to talk about is the personalization. And this can be through data, could be through artificial intelligence. It will drastically change your passenger experience if the airline recognizes today is your birthday. When you arrive at your seat, at the seat screen actually says "Happy Birthday, Sam," or they might even do something for you, right? And then you will forget all your frustration because you have seen something out of the norm and then achieved something there. And the last thing I think is everybody has been talking about we need to be more sustainable. Not necessarily flight shaming and stop flying, but we have to together to find ways to collect, to make collective gains here to make flying sustainable, right? In the old days, as an AvGeek, we do a lot of trick. We do something called mileage run. So mileage run means you spot a very cheap ticket. You're challenging the system. You're going from point A to point B through 5 different stops, so you can earn a lot of miles. But then at that time, there was no awareness of we actually produce a lot of carbon, and we are not aware of that. And then I remember there were even people burning off their miles, go transatlantic, just because they want to go to Germany to eat a steak and then fly back home to the US. And then, so this kind of thing, which I think there is a lot more public awareness now about sustainability, the go greener. And then if you look at Google flights right now, if you select flights, the Google flight will rank the flight outcome and by CO2 emissions there. And then they will actually look at the airplane and also the time in the sky, and they'll tell you how much carbon you are on this airplane when you buy this fare. So there are increasingly public awareness on that from a passenger standpoint.
And you, Sam, as a passenger, what would be ultimately a 10 out of 10 for you? And how can airlines really differentiate in a way that they could provide you that 10 out of 10 type of experience?
I would really say it's the opposite, all the pain points, right? That would be 10 out of 10. If you don't have delays, don't have cancellations, don't have the queues, and then you have a comfortable flights, everything go well as expected. But I think in reality is we have to manage our expectations, and also knowing what to do if your flight's delayed, or you need to kind of manage that expectation when you're traveling. And also I think from a future perspective, the personalization plays a big part to make your flights more enjoyable. You all have a frequent flyer accounts, and then they might know, okay, Sam prefers basketball, he prefers golf, and then when you arrive at your seats, you will have a golf magazine or a basketball videos that is recommended for you because they have already know what your preferences are. And increasingly these days, you get on your seats in some of the airlines and you get to order your food and drinks through that. And I'm not going to be surprised in the future, the galley is going to be automated as well. And it'll be automated coffee trolley going up and down the aisle. And then you just push a button, you self-serve yourself. And there's lots of these kind of automation, technology, and try to streamline that experience and minimizing the human touch, which is kind of, you can argue on both sides. It can be a pro or it can be a con. It can be very efficient if things done right. This is how I think. But again, I think it means very personally too for people to have a 10 out of 10 flights. It's a very personal thing. Personally for me, if I have a really good flight, because I know some people on board, and that you have friends on board, and it makes a lot of differences. I think for me, for a good flight, it lingers on my mind for days. Right? That's a really good flight. And sometimes when you have a good flight, you tend also to forget about your frustration at the airport sometimes, forget about the queue and all that, because there's one single element has done right. Maybe that's the personalization. And yeah, that's pretty much what I would say.
Abdulaziz, you are expected to triple the traffic in the kingdom, so there's lots of white spaces and new opportunities to be addressed and to pioneer new technologies and new solutions. What are your plans at GACA, and how you are defining the new standards in terms of passenger experience?
Actually, looking at 2019 numbers, we're talking about almost 100 million packs throughout the 28 Saudi airports. The growth and the ambition is very high. We are aiming for 330 million. This needs an investment in infrastructure. As you may all heard about the Riyadh new terminal, 100 million passengers, the newly terminal and airports opened in Jeddah with a high capacity and sophisticated passenger experience. And also, we need to accommodate all those 330 million. We need to run efficiently. We need to have our airports digitizing their service. So our partners in the airports now, they are investing in a paperless experience, seamless travel, self-check-in, self-luggage drop-off, and also automation system to gather all the passengers' data for us as a regulator to make sure that where are the bottlenecks throughout the whole journey. So where should we invest? Where should we regulate? So on top of the program that I mentioned earlier, which is the Airport Total Quality Program, we are building another 2 programs. One of them towards the operational excellence. We would like to set the minimum operational standards and let's say the floor for the operation across all the airports, just to make sure as a regulator that when the airport is running by the private sector, that we at least have the minimum required standard. And the second part, and you heard about when His Excellency, the Minister talked about the new airlines in Riyadh and the level of service that we are trying to achieve, and we will achieve in that airlines. We will build also a program from regulator perspective to make sure the level of service get aligned with what Sam said about the passenger expectation. So building that program will take into consideration, we will align with the passenger expectation first. Then we'll go to the airlines also and work with the stakeholders to make sure that we match the standards should be aligned with the passenger expectation and also with the airlines' operation and capabilities. Those 3 programs will set the minimum required standards. We want to be careful and very careful in that area. We do want to over-regulate the market. However, we want to set the minimum required standard, the floor, and the sky is the limit. And I assure you, the Saudi Aviation, be it airports or airlines, by implementing all those standards and regulation, I assure you we will have, the least performing airlines and airports. We will be competing among the top airlines and airports in the world.
David, you are developing and implementing lots of digital and smart kind of solutions. Can you tell us a little bit more about the CETA kind of plans, how to really contribute and to revolutionize the future of the aviation industry?
Yeah, so at this stage and focusing on passenger experience, there are really 3 things I will talk about today. One is, and building on what Sam is saying, we are really, really strong about your face becoming your boarding pass. So the potential of biometric, coupled with digital identity on mobile, so your passport being integrated into your mobile device, so that you've got all of your digital credential, is something in which we believe very strongly. And today that's reality. This is something which pre-pandemic started to get some traction. We at CETA, for example, our biggest deployment is Beijing Capital Airport, 600 biometric touch points throughout the entire passenger journey, very smooth, providing a passenger experience that is better and enabling better operations. We were boarding an A380 in 20 minutes. And so this technology is really at the crossroad of helping the operators bring better performance, better SLA, better operational performance, and giving an experience which people and young generation expects. And by the way, with young generation, I think I totally agree that there is high expectation, and the more seamless, absolutely, the better on our side. Now, if we look a little bit further forward, we are a big believer also of the fact that we as an industry, we need to differentiate and refresh the passenger experience regularly when the infrastructure upon which we operate, airports, which are building concrete, aircraft, which are bought for 20 years, different things are physical touch points which you cannot really improve. So we believe very much into virtual technologies that will help bridge the gap between a regularly changing passenger expectation or operator expectation and the fact that we have to deal with infrastructure that we built for many years. So very concretely, augmented reality visually to help passenger and crew or airport passenger to guide is something which is very strong. The last point is, without any doubt, in some markets and better than others, the extension of air travel towards other mode of transport is very important. So, you've seen the regulation in Europe that is basically going to close potentially some short-term hubbing into airport. As an industry, we need to make the effort to provide the seamless journey, providing also the visibility on the total CO2 consumption of your total options. And that's something which, is another aspect where, we are invested, we are trying to bridge. Obviously, all of that through sharing data with the different mode of transportation. So all of that is at the touch of our hands. Now there is quite some work for wide adoption, but we are really passionate about this.
Professor Keys, if we move a little bit more to sustainability topic, and we know that there are lots of commitments in the industry to really reduce the carbon footprint, and these will have different implications across the full kind of value chain and the passenger experience. So in your view, how can we move towards a more sustainable kind of passenger experience throughout the full kind of travel kind of experience?
Yes, thank you. I was laughing because we were talking about sort of intermodalism, and in the UK, in London, we have just opened a brand new shiny rail system that connects Heathrow to London town, but doesn't connect London town to London City Airport. So missed opportunity there. How do we do that? And if we're moving towards trying to move as much traffic to surface modes, then these are missed opportunities. I think Willie Walsh said this morning what the answer is, which is the vast majority of the move toward net zero, much is invested in SAFs. And that's where the focus needs to be. Certainly at Cranfield, we're working, we've just had a fully electric passenger plane flight. We are working around new hydrogen concepts, and we've just had hydrogen planes working, but that's not the big problem. The short haul is not the big problem. The big problem is flying long haul, and that's a challenge. The technology is there. It's being able to scale up and have leadership from governments and the industry to focus towards that. Having said that, there's some smaller things we can do, which is by removing pinch points, some of the things that we've been talking about, you can get better flow. What we don't need is to have delays at airports. Why do we have delays at airports? Is there a surprise that a plane that has been flying for 10 hours arrives at the airport and all of a sudden the airport didn't know it was arriving and that there isn't a gate? So let's get that stuff right. We've heard it 2 or 3 times today, getting the flow, air traffic management is maybe 10 or 12% of all emissions for the industry. We've got to do that. It's suboptimal. We need to be able to fly direct. We need to move on the short haul towards newer renewable sources of energy. And for customers, what does that mean? It means it's a pleasure. You get in the airport, you don't have to sort of go through lots of pinch points because your face is your passport. You can go and actually spend time when you want. And now the airline can actually understand where you are in the airport because your face is your locator, your watch is your locator, and it can call you to the gate when you're actually needed. So you're not using a lot of the real estate of the airport for creating queues. You can actually use it for, I don't know, more shops, more opportunities to do better things and create more revenues. So yeah, there's lots of opportunities. On board, get rid of the plastics. You know, it was an absolute pleasure to fly with Saudia yesterday and have a glass and have cutlery, metal cutlery, and, you know, no plastics in my, my delivered meal experience. These are small things, but they're substantial. Being able to take out weight for duty-free trolleys. Can we do that better? The reason we carry duty-free around in the aircraft, weighing 80 kilos per trolley and burning in incredible amounts of CO2 when things are not being sold from one flight to the other, is because the airline doesn't want to lose the sale to the airport. Because if you don't buy it on board the aircraft, you're going to buy it at the airport. So can you work that better and try and get rid of the physical flying of perfumes backwards and forwards across the world? It just wastes carbon. Small, but significant.
Finally, Abdulaziz, you are representing here today the Saudi government, and you at GAC, you are in charge and the orchestrator of the National Aviation Sector Strategy. Can you tell us a little bit more about your plans to make sure that this will happen and to make sure that you have the right coordination and the ecosystem between the private and the public kind of entities? And what is the support and the opportunities for the broader kind of ecosystem of different service providers?
That's actually a great question and comes with a great timing. I mean, early this morning, His Excellency the President announced that the GAC is leading an initiative called Harmonizing Air Travel Policy White Paper. The aim of this framework, or the aim of this initiative, is to build a framework where we have all the states and government and private sector communicating and having all the travel requirements in one framework and one platform. What happened during COVID, when you travel from one point to another point, you are not, I mean, when you think what documents to carry on, what vaccination you need to have, it was kind of a bit chaotic at that time. So this initiative or this framework came just to solve this kind of confusion. Hundreds of millions of passengers are, reluctant to travel just to avoid the hassle of being returned back from the destination because they didn't carry the right paper, they didn't have the right vaccination or so on. So this aims to make sure that we have a seamless, enjoyable travel experience. GACA is leading this field. Is trying to connect all the stakeholders to orchestrate all the experience, and looking forward to work with all the agencies, WHO, ICAO, and all the other agencies to make this initiative a successful initiative.
We are running a bit short of time, so I would like to thank you very much to our panel members and to Sam, David, and Professor Keith to fly to Riyadh. So thank you very much for your time and your presence here today in this forum. So now I would like to open just for a few questions from the audience. So
questions.
Yeah. I think there is a micro. I know we are running a bit short of time, but I think we still have time for a few questions. 2 questions? 2 questions.
Good afternoon. Can you hear me? Well, I have a question. Probably it has not come across, but it's fundamental in terms of the customer experience, and that is the amount of levies, taxes, fees that are normally charged on the tickets. And these sometimes could range from different airports and different countries between 20 to maybe 50%. And I think these are deep in the customer's experience. And also for airports or countries that compete with each other in terms for traffic, they can be determined to make a decision when it comes to flying for passengers, that whether they take a transit through another country or versus another country, or come directly because of the different amounts of levies and taxes that are charged. And if you just read the breakdown sometimes on these tickets, you find that everyone who has a relationship to this airport, whether security, non-security, whatever, has a certain levy, whether it's in percentage or in an amount. Thank you.
Not sure if you want to address, Professor Keith.
Oh, thank you. So I think you have to be a bit careful about what is taxes and what is passenger service charge. And they vary. And I think what we've seen in taking the lead from low-cost carriers is that which airlines try and get the lowest price on the ticket as possible, and then add back in other things as they go along. I think the areas that you're talking about are perhaps interesting and can lead to circuitous routings, because you are through one hub maybe paying a lower set of service charges in one airport as another. And that really is commercial choices between the different airports. Whether there is a role for ACI to try and bring that to some sort of level playing field is a different question. But it's a challenging question, but I think there's 2 parts to it. Okay.
Good. I thought we had time for a second question, but they are waiting one of our panel members in the main stage, so we need to close here. But I want to thank you very much again for all the panel members and for all the audience to be here with us this afternoon. So thank you very much.
Thank you.